like a sledgehammer every Saturday. It's Busted Pencils fully leaded. Education talk, educated educators talking education. Dr. Johnny Lupinacci, Jacob, chairman of the board, me, Dr. Tim Slecker, coming from my new bunker, I guess you would say.
Hey,
I
man.
I'm in right now. And no, it's not a bunker in Iran. So
Oh,
President Trump, don't target me.
it's
Okay.
too soon, man. Let's hope not.
Lots going on, and by this time, if you're listening to this show on Saturday, who knows that joke might not be funny. We don't know what's going to
I
happen,
mean, the
but
verdict is out whether it was ever funny, Tim, but it was made. It's out there, you know.
you know,
So,
it's out there. It's one of those things that are happening. Yeah, and aside right now, Johnny came in, Jacob and I were talking before the show started. If been paying attention, escalations in the Middle East, talking about Israel's pretty precise bombing and targeting of high-ranking military leaders in Iran. Iran now pushing back. And the big question here that may be answered by the time you're listening to it is what's America going to do? Will we get involved? And current President Trump right now is playing what they say 4D chess that he's so good at right now, and kind of putting forth a strategy of feigned indecision to kind of juke out and potentially keep people on the ropes. Jacob, is that how you would characterize the brilliance of strategy you're seeing going on?
Not at all, Tim. Uh, Best case scenario, I think we're somewhere in the realm of strategery, and worst case scenario, I don't want to even get into that. So I wouldn't say 4D chess. He can barely play, three-dimensional checkers.
Well, again, we'll see. We're reporting on it, but it's Saturday. Love the show. Love spending 1 hour with everybody out there on Civic Media, especially everybody listening right now in their cars. Out there flipping hamburgers. Hopefully the rain is letting up all across Wisconsin. We know there's been a lot of rain. I could say right here in the new bunker in Pennsylvania. Same thing. Right now, a canoe would come in handy if I needed to go out and get my mail. Right now, because Johnny, it's really wet here in Pennsylvania, and I know Jacob said in Madison, all Wisconsin too, getting a lot of rain. What about you out there? On the not that you're on the left coast, but you're in the state of Washington. How's the weather?
Yeah, do you
well,
get
I'm
much
certainly
rain in the
closer to the
Pacific
left.
Northwest?
I'm closest to the Pacific of anybody here. About 5 hours inland. It's dry. We're supposed to be getting some rain, probably somewhat affiliated. It's been a little more humid. Usually we're really dry, so that probably tracks for big rainfall, like in
Mhm.
all directions. But no, it's been sunny, been nice weather. Enjoying summer. School's out this week for both my kids, so we're enjoying the lakes, being
Mm.
outside, spending some time in some beautiful weather. It's supposed to cool off though, and it's supposed to rain. Go figure. I don't know whether that's blowing across the country or we're just due for a little bit of it, but it's unseasonably extra dry, which is worrisome.
Mm.
Fire country, right?
Yeah.
So it's not even July yet. Things are pretty dry.
Yeah, not
So
that worry is not actually happening here right now. You go past some of the state forests here around Pennsylvania, where I'm at, Western Pennsylvania. The Smoky Bear. What should you do right now? Smoky Bear is holding an umbrella.
yeah,
Um, you know, he's like checking it out. The other part though, too, just in case, what's interesting, typically people are like, Tim, are you complaining about the rain? No,
no,
I actually really enjoy rain. What I'm not enjoying right now is that in my new location here in Pennsylvania, in the bunker, man cave, whatever you want to call it, the new house, we're here, my wife and I, Michelle, mom Michelle, has been on the show a few times. we're in the house, and we've been here since Saturday, and our moving truck, which has all of our stuff in it, is delayed until maybe Friday. They're hoping maybe Saturday, maybe Monday or Tuesday. So that will be 10 days without our moving truck. And what's on our moving truck? Lawnmower. And right now, the lawn right now the lawn, we're starting to look like we're those neighbors. I can see right now everybody's looking out going, oh my God, we got people who don't cut the grass who've moved in. And we're trying to say we're not those neighbors. So boy, talk about an aside. But Johnny, when you don't have a lawnmower and it's
Tim, man, you got to go talk to your neighbors. Just be like, hey, man, got to get this lawn cut for everybody's good. And my lawnmower is delayed an extra couple of days. And, you know, just reach out and start meeting those neighbors.
yeah, we've had a couple actually. The next door neighbor was cutting the grass. Right now, Mom Michelle and I are in a little bit of a discussion as to how appropriate would be to ask him to do it one more time. I think it's perfectly appropriate, and
Bro, you bring the universal neighborly gift.
what's your universal neighborly gift?
Man, the nectar of the gods, of
Okay,
course. Beer.
nice cold 6 pack.
Always. I say, hey, man, what's your favorite what's your favorite beverage of choice? And,
Exactly.
I said, we got to have one soon. And then I come bearing, a large quantity of it for his. Come on, this is outside of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I know he's got a garage fridge.
He's got a garage fridge
He
and
does. You got a garage
I
fridge
got
on the truck, so you're gonna stock it with his favorite beers, and you say, man, I'll keep you well hydrated through the summer. Just throw another quick round on my lawn for me.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about it too, being back here, yeah, a little bit north of Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania. If I bring beer, I should bring Iron City or Icy Light, that the beer of the 1970s Steelers, the champions, the world famous, most awesome football dynasty of the time. The Mean Joe Green, Jack Lambert, Terry Bradshaw, Dwight White, the Iron City beer can that when I was in fourth grade, we've talked about this on the show. We glued an ashtray to the top of that commemorative beer can, and that was our fundraiser in fourth grade, was to go around selling ashtrays.
Nice.
So so Jacob, did you ever have to have a school fundraiser where you sold ashtrays?
No, Tim, I grew up slightly after the 70s. So some of the things had changed culturally speaking.
Hey, think about that. Well, today though, you could sell it as a candy dish.
Now the kids are selling vape pens to raise money for the school, I believe.
Oh man, we don't want to go there. Okay, education. You guys are supposed to be talking about education. Well, Johnny, news has broke, and there's a little bit of discontent for anybody who's a Democrat. Going, what in the world is going on with the Democrats? I thought, maybe today we could try to figure that out and actually use an example, kind of hot off the presses, just happened this week. Great guest who's been on the show quite a few times, AFT President Randy Weingarten, um, actually. Prominent post in the Democratic National Committee for over 20 years, decided that she's out and she has walked away from the Democratic National Committee. No, she did not quit being a Democrat. She said, though, the leadership, and John, I'm going to just start with her quote. Her quote for her walking away in a letter to the leadership of the Democratic National Committee, quote, I appear to be out of step with the leadership you are forging, the union leader said on this, and I do not want to be the one who keeps questioning why we are not enlarging our tent and actively trying to engage more of our communities, end quote. And I take that as saying, um, why are we as Democrats being so focused on little kind of, special interest instead of expanding out. I'm going to take this and we have we have out a request to get Randy back on the show to talk about this. But I hear this critique as saying, you know what, Democrats, for the longest time, you've moved to be so exclusive in who you include in the Democrats that guess what? Now it has come a reckoning that catering and kowtowing to small, let's just talk about it, the kind of wealthy billionaire uber ultra liberal left hasn't really worked out so well when it comes to winning elections. And if we're really going to talk about it here, let's get back to, and Johnny, see how you're going to take this, but those blue collar scholars like Tim and Johnny, the heart and soul of some of the Democrats, how do we get them back? And in fact, this comes after David Hogg. If you follow this, David Hogg was one of the survivors from the Parkland school shooting in Florida, who's kind of risen up there and became a member. He was also then kind of put out of the Democratic National Committee because he had the audacity to make a suggestion that some of the Democrats that are kind of languishing and doing nothing, maybe we should primary them. In other words, kind of put some other people out there to say, hey, look, you're not doing your job. I'm here to kind of question you and maybe take you out. He put that out there, and the leadership of the traditional DMC was not happy about somebody inwardly saying, let's primary some of the people that have been in power for a long time who maybe aren't doing anything. That's all that lead up. I know we're coming up on that first break, but Johnny, you hear where I'm going with this.
I think so, Tim. I mean, some people might talk about this as infighting amongst the Democrats. Remember, democracy is messy, and the Democrats are hopefully finding their democratic sense,
Mm.
right? Not just as a party labeled the Democrats, but as champions of democracy. Have they strayed away from their game? You talked about dynasties, and you referenced that great era of Pittsburgh Steeler football. And as a Lions fan, I have to be like, yeah, it was a pretty good era. And then there were a few more eras after that. It's a town of great success. Well, the Democrats have a legacy of being advocates and champions of democracy, but have strayed from that, especially in recent elections. And so I think, figuring out is messy, but it sounds like that's what's happening.
We'll see. I don't know. What are we thinking about as we're coming in here? Democrats, are they just a mess? Are they falling apart? Or is this potential, what appears to maybe be falling apart, something that it could be a realignment for Democrats who might really come time to get their act together? Got a lot more of that discussion. Busted Pencils. More when we get back. Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Educated educators talking education, talking Democrats, democracy, AFT, Randy Weingarten. Commenting on this is an article coming out of Politico. Teachers Union President Randy Weingarten resigns from DNC, Democratic National Committee. The question here is that she's had such a prominent role in the leadership of the Democratic National Committee. People are asking questions. What's happening internally? Is this a good thing, or is this kind of a signal of continued chaos and fracturing of a Democratic Party that can't seem to get its marching direction, going in a way that could potentially show that we're not just kind of sitting around twiddling our thumbs, letting the country, disintegrate under the current leadership. I don't know, but Johnny, I what I like here is that again back, the show. We're talking about education, public education. To see the president of AFT, a teacher, showing to me, this is showing teachers, particularly who she's representing, not just teachers too, but all of the service workers, the nurses that are there. But there's a leadership here from a teacher saying, you know what, at this moment, where things are going, I'm stepping aside. I'm showing leadership because I feel that democracy is better served and the Democratic Party is better served when we create a bigger tent and we're more inclusive of potentially points of view that might rub up against quote some kind of traditional or not traditional but the litmus tests of kind of where ultra left democrats have kind of gone where it's like if you're not 100% in agreement with every single thing that I believe in, then you can't be a democrat. And I see the leadership that Randy's putting forward here is kind of saying like, you know what, in a democracy, to get work done, to benefit the most, to benefit the common, we need to include voices. We need to include voices because Johnny, you're always talking about, what does it mean to live in a democracy? What are the foundations of a democracy? And that's including voices, lots of voices. So I see this as a really great example for all of the teachers out there to say, you know what, here's our one of our union leaders showing real leadership in a democracy and what it means to do that. That's kind of my initial thought right now, Johnny Lupinacci.
Well, absolutely, Tim. I mean, a lot of us, lifetime card carrying Democrats, and yeah, I'll align myself there, have been rather displeased in recent years. And I think about, growing up, learning about the values of the Democratic platform and the Democratic Party, right, was the promotion of social programs. We've been talking about it on
Mhm.
this show. Jacob said, hey, isn't that communism? It's absolutely not, right? He showed us and we teased out the importance of like social programs, but social programs, aka sometimes referred to around the world as part of a socialist democracy. But the Democratic Party has been, stalwarts of championing social programs, whether that's access to food or social welfare, the well-being of all of the people in our communities. They've also championed labor unions. So I was proud as a card carrying, not only a card carrying Democrat, but as a card carrying teacher,
Mm.
right? Part of the AFT, to see the president of the labor union who does so much work to represent the hard labor of not only teachers, but of people on the front lines of doing democracy work in our communities, but nurses and teachers,
Hmm.
the AFT and all the hardworking union members of this country. So, we think about the Democratic Party as being uh, promoters of social programs, of labor unions, of consumer protections,
Mm.
right? We're in this downturned economy where everything's more and more expensive. And it seems like, recent legislation on both sides of the aisle have not thought about us, the consumers, right? And it's been more about deregulation than regulation. The Democratic Party also, as a laborer, have been champions in history of workplace safety regulations,
Mm.
right? I think about that as a teacher. I mean, there's not a teacher out there who's not concerned about their safety and the safety of children in our communities. Now, also workplace safety, I usually think of OSHA, right? I
Right.
think about, I had to make sure we always had two people if we were lifting something heavier than a certain number of pounds, or that I used a ladder properly, or if I was using certain power tools, that I had safety training in that, and the the protective ear protection and, eye protection, but workplace safety, that's just about everything. That's making sure our airports are safe, our hospitals are safe, and our schools, right? So Democrats, hey, think about that. For decades and decades, you've been champions of workplace safety, but yet schools have never been more unsafe. They're also champions of equal opportunity, disability rights, and racial equity. I mean, come on, Tim, like both you and I, even though we're older, we were products of a civil rights movement. And this is the largest social uprising of all of our lifetime, built on the shoulders of that amazing civil rights movement. It's still going. We think about like Black Lives Matter today, climate change activism, disability rights, queer activists around our country, young people speaking out about gun violence. But we have all of these commitments to equal opportunity, disability rights, racial equity, and regulation against environmental pollution. And the last one I'll end on is Democrats have long been known as champions for the justice system. All that's broken. So I was proud to see our union president say, this isn't working for me right now.
Yeah, when you hear that heavy drum beat. Yeah, that's Tim, Johnny, Jacob, Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk, educated educators talking education. Man, half the show gone already. I don't know how do we do it? Democrats, Randy Weingarten, favorite famous guest of Busted Pencils, not on right now. We have the invitation out to her though. But talking about the fact that for 20 years she has been a prominent leader within the Democratic National Committee, and this week she stepped away. And in her letter to the chair, there was comments of pointing to the fact that she feels that the party isn't headed in a more inclusive, bigger tent direction, and right now that kind of work really isn't for her to. What I read that as we as Democrats need to expand and invite and include more of the population, the people, our neighbors, the voters. We need to get them, back to the party. How many disenfranchised Democrats are out there? And, how many Democrats, particularly in the traditional blue collar, let's just say, Johnny, your hometown Detroit, my hometown Pittsburgh, used to be incredibly, absolutely 100%, blue collar, blue Democrats, and now you look at particularly Pittsburgh here, right? And a lot of quote traditional Democrats, and I will say a good portion of my extended family who were Democrats in the last 20 years have either become a non-participant politically and civically, or have totally moved on. You know, some genetic flaw that is from some other part of the lineage, not the Slecker lineage, I would assume, but have fallen victim to the MAGA movement. And you're looking at that and you go, how does a traditional blue collar, blue Democrat find themselves, advocating at Thanksgiving that I'm some kind of crazy Marxist leftist liberal, and that's why they're now a MAGA person. And we can dismiss my crazy cousins and my crazy uncle, or maybe we need to ask a question: why did they leave the party? Jacob, I see you're pulling up the mic there. What do you say I say to my cousins and my uncles?
I think that I struggle with this myself, having a lot of family members who seem to have really gone full in on the MAGA train, and it doesn't always make sense to me. I have a hard time breaking down what exactly it is. But I think that you can't dismiss it, Tim. I think we can't dismiss it because there have always been those generational divides where your crazy uncle,
Mm.
he's older, he's more conservative. That's always been the case. But back in 1992 and 1996 and 2008 and 2012, we all had crazy uncles, but Democrats
Mm.
were winning. They're
Yeah.
winning elections. So when the population is turning against the party, you can't ignore it. And I think populists are great at pointing out problems. They find things that make people upset. They have terrible answers. I think the obligation and the responsibility of the reasonable people in society, a little bit closer to me, I think, politically
Mhm.
speaking, we have an obligation to meet people where they are and to find good solutions to the problems that they're telling us they have. We can't sit here and tell people, no, those problems don't exist, or no, you're wrong about your problems. We need to come
Yeah.
up with better solutions.
Yeah, or your problem isn't nearly as bad as the problem that I'm championing right at this moment.
Yeah.
And I know the problem I'm championing right now is not popular with all of your neighbors and your crazy uncles, but it's what I stand for, and I'm not going to include anybody who doesn't understand how passionate I am about my one issue.
And I think the
Um,
better way to bring people over to your one issue is that when you show that you care about what they're telling you is impacting them, then that is going to make them more inclined to come over and care about what you care about. You got to
mhm.
show that you care about the mass of the voters first, and then you bring them along to your more difficult to understand problems.
Yeah, yeah, and I see this again back to Randy Weingarten. I mean, she's representing teachers, right? And where are teachers politically? What is their party? And I gotta say that I know quite a few teachers who maybe aren't full MAGA, but are potentially maybe more along the lines of going like I'm not real happy with where the Democrats are going and feeling themselves excluded. Johnny, I don't know if your interactions with the teachers that you're working with, if you're hearing some discontent with the Democratic Party from teachers, because I am.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we talked about it before when I talked about the core values or principles of the Democratic Party, and things they had been championing and continued to promise but not deliver. Think by and large teachers are a little bit fed up with the funding of their schools, the increased emphasis on test scores, not on student achievement, because
Mhm.
find me a good teacher that doesn't want students learning important things.
Right.
They don't exist. All right. But the overemphasis on a numerical score as a measure of whether or not a young person is growing and developing, is, like you pointed out a number of times, Tim, not only narrow sighted, but it's detrimental, to our future communities, to our strong democracy. So, that compounded with school shootings. I hate to be
Yeah,
like, the guy who's bringing the most dramatic, hyperbolic stuff into the arena here, but it's true. I mean, like Tim, we got to be teachers. It
hmm
wasn't easier to be a teacher when we were teachers, necessarily the job of teaching. But I can't remember a single day of the first years of my teaching where I really thought deep down in my heart that we could have a school shooting in my school. I
absolutely.
mean, we'd had Columbine, and we had a few kind of outlier instances of this, and it seemed as though it was being discussed as handled. We would not, this would not become a mainstay and a regular fear for young people and for teachers. And nowadays, Tim, it's every day, every teacher I talk to has it listed as a concern that's on their minds, on top of the many other things. Add into that, currently immigration stuff, which is more closely linked to the recent administration. So I won't wholeheartedly point my finger at the Democratic Party on this. But work conditions for teachers are not great,
Mm-mm.
right? And so that's that they are in a I would say in a state of discontent with any political party's efforts to supporting children in schools, right?
Yeah.
It's like you got to ask the question that one of our inspirations back in the day, Tim, and I think he's still going at it. But Jonathan Kozel,
Yeah.
right, when we were becoming, I'm being nostalgic today, but when Tim and I were teachers, we weren't worried about school shootings every day, but we certainly had students who experienced poverty and
Oh,
unequal funding and tough lives. And there was a champion of those stories in our world of education, Jonathan Kozel, and he would regularly say, you know, do you like children? Do you like more than just your own children? Do you
hmm
really care about children? Because if you care about children, especially children in this country, well, you would be doing things as a government very differently in
yes.
terms of you would be making sure that their well-being is cared for, that they had access to, healthcare, to good pediatricians, to dental, you know, hygiene, like dentists around schools and all those kinds of welfare programs. Yeah, I said it, welfare. It's
Mhm.
not a pejorative, right? But it became such in our lifetimes, Tim. And so I think about that. Do you care about children? I've yet to find a good teacher who, at their core, doesn't care about children.
Right.
Every great teacher out there, and there are lots of them, they glow with care for children. They genuinely advocate for children's well-being. They teach children with all of their heart and energy, and they care about children. They care about this country. They are true patriots and defenders of democracy. Yet they are constantly beat down by
hmm
both Republicans and Democrats who have failed to not only fund the schools, the workplaces that they're in, but at a core fundamental level, acknowledge that children ought not to be suffering when we can do more in our schools. So I know I sound like I'm on a soapbox,
There he
but
goes.
channeling that inspiration that, one of my heroes, Jonathan Kozol, would say over and over again, if you care about children, then actually do something that helps them. And I'm not talking to teachers out there. They're doing it every
Yeah,
day,
every
every
day.
single day. I'm not talking about parents. I assume parents are doing that by and large every day to the best of their capacities. But what I am talking about are the decision makers, the legislators, the administrations, the government who fail decade after decade to care about kids. It's that simple. So I was proud of our union president, Tim, when she
Yeah.
said, this doesn't seem to be a good representation of not only teachers, but of the work that I've come to represent in my career and on my political stage. I can't co sign on hurting children. She didn't say exactly, but she's come on this show and said, what we have to get past him on both sides of the aisle is putting kids in the line of fire and making
Exactly.
classrooms in this country a battlefield, a battleground. And that is where we're at. And teachers feel it. And by and large, I was just as proud as I could be to hear. She said, not me, not as part of this group. We can do better. And by golly, we're gonna.
Yeah, we got it. And that's it. We got to do better. And this just drives into me, John. You talk about that too. The P word, poverty. Poverty, income inequality, those things right there. You talk about that as an inclusive message of more, and Jacob, maybe your family members, my family members. One of the things that they're united in, things aren't going well right now economically. It's hard to make it wherever you're from, and Democrats have been horrible at actually advocating. And for me, this is me talking, not Randy Weingart or anybody, but the Democratic Party has become its own party of rich people who just happen to have left proclivities, but they're still just wealthy people. And Democrats, the current leadership that I see out there right now, who are continuing to lose elections, is that the party continues to be beholden to the billionaire Democrat class of funders. And now I'm going to go back and go, and you know what? Bernie has always been right on this issue.
Oh,
Always been
oh,
right on this issue. Are the Democrats going to actually recognize the reality that the majority of our neighbors are feeling and facing? Hey, I don't know, but we got one more little time, after this commercial break. See what Johnny and I can make out of this. Maybe even Jacob too. Yeah, it's that time. It's the Busted Pencils dancing moments. A time when you like to get up and, well, not me, because you do not want to see me get up and dance. Anybody remember the Seinfeld, the Elaine dance? Mine is worse than Elaine. So let's make sure that this isn't seen. Oh, Democrats, what are you going to do? We're saying right now, Randy Weingarten stepped away from the leadership in the Democratic National Committee. No, she did not quit being a Democrat, but she took herself out of the current leadership of the Democratic Party that I think rightfully can be said and criticized for going in a direction that is not helping democracy. I'm going to put it out that way, Johnny. Democrats have are not helping democracy, and you're not going to win elections when you're not helping democracy, because my neighbor knows that. They understand that. They recognize that. And, if we're going to, represent and be champions of democracy, then being more and more insular and very, very protective to, party purity, you're not going to win elections. And part of living in a democracy and being able then to have some sense of putting your words and your efforts into the part of being in a democracy, which is being in a representative government and electing those people, you got to win so that we can advocate and have people who are putting forth policy issues that change the narrative for people who are feeling disenfranchised, on the out, not represented, not a part of. And so this is what I see from my limited point of view here, as I say, from the Pennsylvania bunker. um Democrats, you're on the ropes, and maybe you ought to stop blaming Trump for you being on the ropes and start realizing that maybe you're to blame for the fact that you're on the ropes, not because of current President Trump. I don't know. That's how I'm thinking about it, Johnny.
Well, yeah, Tim. I mean, this goes back a ways. This is not new. You brought it up earlier in the broadcast today. You talked about Bernie Sanders,
Mm.
and you look at the way that um, issues that matter to people, by and large, are underrepresented at the highest level. And we
Mhm.
learned that early in those primaries years and years ago. Not even focusing on the current crisis this country is in, but dating back to that time where there was a large support politically in this country in a populist way of saying, hey, we need to change things. We need to get back to strengthening the middle class, to addressing and eliminating poverty. We need to
Mhm.
get really close to strengthening our local economies. We need to be more proactive about the environment's health. We need to be advocates of education for everyone and for healthcare. Some of the like the signatory aspects of, and I hate this language, but of a developed country, right? It's that simple. So I go back to that thinking I'm excited not for the crisis that we're in, but for the conversations that are happening at
Mhm.
even that high level, right? Of the Democrat Party saying, hey, we might be, and people are reporting that they're infighting. It's not infighting, it's figuring out their identity. It's doing some deep self-evaluation of who do we represent, what do we stand for, and what are we doing about it? Who do we represent? What do we stand for? And what are we doing about it? So if those three things are part of the conversation, I'm excited about it, Tim, and I think it will generate really awesome things for this country. Remember, I'm an optimist, so I'll kind of that's my wrap up today.
Man, I love that. Johnny being yeah, actually you're always the optimist. That doesn't mean Tim's the pessimist. I just sometimes like to keep it real, but I am too, Johnny. I'm very optimistic here for the fact that maybe the somebody like a Randy Weingarten, that message will be heard. I'm hoping, I'm optimistic about this being hopefully something where the Democrats themselves can go, whoa, we really need to figure this out and dig deep. And now it's time for your moment of Zen. Patriotism doesn't mean support of government. Patriotism means support of the principles it's supposed to stand for.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you're having a great weekend. This is Busted Pencils broadcast today. And remember, you could grab lots of great podcasts chocked full of more fully leaded education talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, on the Civic Media website or at bustedpencils.com. Hey, and don't be late for homeroom on Monday. And make sure that you catch next week's classes session on Wednesday. And you can always find us on Friday for Jacob's Producer's Choice. And of course, you can catch us like today, Busted Pencils, 3 p.m. Central Time across all the Civic Media Network stations for 1 hour of your favorite, a blue collar scholars, Tim and Johnny, and keep busting pencils.